I used up my entire savings constructing a guest house in my parents' backyard, believing it was meant for me. The moment it was finished, my dad handed me my bags. "Your sister needs it more than you," he said. I walked away in silence. A week passed. They called me in a frenzy once they realized. I don't even know where to begin. It still feels surreal. For years, I'd been making careful choices to build a stable future. I wasn't careless with money. I never acted irresponsibly. I followed every rule, did everything right. When I finally accepted that buying a home on my own was out of reach, it was my parents who came up with the idea. Build a small guest house on their land. They made it sound ideal. "It'll be yours forever," my mom had told me. "This is an investment in your future, sweetheart." And I believed them. I poured every last cent into it, all my weekends, my time off, working side by side with the contractors, making sure it was done properly. I chose the floors, the cabinetry, every small touch that made it feel personal. For months, I envisioned living there. It wasn't just some guest room, it was my home, my refuge. Then the day came, move-in day, but instead of a key, my dad casually gave me my bags and said the words that still make me feel sick. "Your sister needs it more than you." Just like that, as if I meant nothing. What hurt the most was how normal they made it seem. There was no regret, no pause. They'd made the choice long before I ever knew. I stood there stunned, half expecting him to grin and say it was a joke, but he didn't. I turned to my mother, hoping to see some remorse, some doubt. She only sighed and smiled, as if this was the most logical thing in the world. "You're young, Emily. No husband, no kids. You'll land on your feet. But your sister, this will give her a fresh start." My stomach dropped. "You promised this was mine," I said, my voice trembling. Mom let out another sigh, like I was being unreasonable. "It's still part of the family, sweetie. And family helps family." I looked over at my sister, not even a hint of guilt on her face. "I mean, you don't really need it, Em," she said with a shrug. "And it's not like you were paying rent or anything." I almost laughed, not because any of it was funny, but because it was absolutely absurd. I paid for everything. The building costs, materials, labor, appliances, every single thing. It was all my money. And yet somehow they were making me out to be selfish for wanting to live in the space I had created. I wanted to scream, to fight back, to claim what was rightfully mine. But when I looked at their faces, I realized it wouldn't matter. They had made their decision long ago. They never intended for me to live there. They just needed me to build it. I don't even remember packing. I just remember walking away, leaving behind the home I had built with my own hands. No arguments, no shouting, just silence. I just left, and I think that confused them more than anything. Maybe they expected me to beg, to try to negotiate, to fight for something that was already mine. I was too tired, so I walked out, and that's when the real silence started. At first, they didn't call, didn't check in. I think they assumed I'd come crawling back. Maybe they thought I'd change my mind and offered to just share the guest house with my sister. I didn't. Instead, I cut off contact, not in an official, dramatic way. I just stopped being available, and I waited, because deep down I knew something they didn't. I knew they had cut corners. I had been so careful choosing contractors, making sure everything was done right. But at the very end of the process, my dad decided to save money by hiring his own guy to finish up some of the final details. Things like the plumbing, the electrical, the last coat of paint. I told him it was a mistake. I told him to let the professionals finish, but he laughed. "Emily, you worry too much. My guy knows what he's doing. Besides, why? Waste more money." I let it go after all. I was the one who was going. To be living there, something went wrong. I'd deal with it. But now, it was my sister's problem. A week later, the call started first, my mom. I let it go to voicemail, then my sister. I ignored her, then my dad. By the time I checked my phone, I had 6 missed calls. I finally listened to the voicemail from my mom. Her voice was strained, irritated, not apologetic. "Emily, I don't know if you did something or if you knew something, but the guest house has a major issue. The plumbing is leaking into the walls. The electrician must have messed something up because the power keeps going out. And there's a terrible smell coming from somewhere inside. Your sister can't even move in yet. We need to talk. I played it twice, then I left. Not because I did anything, not because I planned it, but because they did this to themselves the moment I left. They realized how much they needed me, and I wasn't coming back. I ignored my mother's voicemail. Not out of pettiness, not because I wanted revenge, but because for the first time in my life, it wasn't my problem. I didn't do anything to that house. I hadn't sabotaged it, hadn't left anything unfinished. The only thing I had done was walk away, and now, a week later, it was already falling apart. I sat with my phone in my lap, staring at the missed calls. I knew I should have felt something. Satisfaction. Anger. Relief. But mostly I just felt empty, because this wasn't just about the house. It wasn't about the money I had spent or the time I had wasted. It was about everything that led up to that moment, because deep down, I had always known my family had never treated me the same way they treated my sister. But I had convinced myself that if I worked hard enough, if I was useful enough, if I was good enough, they would see me as just as important. I had spent my entire life trying to prove myself to people who would never choose me. And this was just the final proof, because I had literally built a home for myself in their world, and the moment it was finished, they had kicked me out like I was nothing. I turned off my phone and let myself remember. It started when we were kids. My sister Lisa was the baby. She could do no wrong. If we got into an argument, it was always my fault if something broke in the house. Lisa could lie straight to my parents' faces, and they would still find a way to blame me. She's younger than you, Emily. You need to set an example. You're just being difficult. I learned young that Lisa didn't have to take responsibility for anything, because I would always be expected to pick up the pieces. I can't even count the number of times she lost something important, her phone, her wallet, even her passport once, and somehow I was the one sent to help fix it. But the worst part, she was never grateful. Not once, not when I covered for her, when she skipped class, not when I gave her money, when she blew through her allowance, not when she crashed my car and lied to my parents that it was my fault, and my parents, they never cared about fairness. They cared about keeping Lisa happy. I still remember the day I realized just how deep that went. It was the summer before college. I had been saving every penny I made from my part-time job, planning to buy a used car so I wouldn't have to rely on rides. My parents had promised to match whatever I saved, so I worked all summer, barely spending anything. Then 2 weeks before I was supposed to buy the car, Lisa wrecked hers. Not a minor accident, a complete write-off the next day. I came home to find out my parents had given her all of my savings to buy a new car. Lisa needs it more, my mom had said when I confronted her. You're leaving for college soon. She still has to get to school. I was so stunned, I just stood there. They didn't even ask me, didn't even pretend to consider how unfair it was. And when I told them I was upset, they acted like I was selfish for even bringing it up. We're a family, Emily, my dad had said, shaking his head. You'll understand when you're older. I did understand, just not the way he thought. That was the first time I pulled away, the first time I realized I wasn't safe with them. But I didn't cut them off, not completely, because I still wanted to believe that someday things would change, that they would see me as equal, that they would finally choose me. So when they suggested building the guest house, I thought, this is it. This is my chance to have something that's mine, and I fell for it. A sharp vibration from my phone pulled me back to the present, another call. I sighed and finally picked up. It was my dad. This time, his voice was tight, frustrated. Emily, what's going on with the house? I blinked. What do you mean? You know what I mean. His voice dropped lower like he thought someone might be listening. Lisa can't even move in yet. The plumbing is completely messed up. There's water damage in the walls. The electrical is faulty, and now the whole place smells like mold, I almost laughed. Sounds like you should call a contractor. There was a pause. Look, he said, his tone shifting like he was trying to stay calm. If something happened, you need to tell me now. Did you leave something unfinished? Did you mess something up? I clenched my jaw. I didn't do anything, Dad. You're the one who hired that cheap contractor against my advice. Maybe you should call him. Another pause. He wasn't expecting me to stand my ground. Emily, we don't have the money to fix this right now. There was the real reason he was calling. My parents thought they could get me to come back and clean up their mess. I closed my eyes. I'm sorry, Dad, but this isn't my responsibility. Silence. Then came the anger. Emily, don't act like this. I didn't respond. You can't just walk away from your family, he snapped, voice rising. We raised you. We gave you everything. I let out a slow breath, fingers tightening around the phone. No, Dad. I gave you everything. And I'm done. I ended the call. For the next several days, the phone wouldn't stop ringing. Calls from my mom, my dad, even Lisa. Some were furious, shouting demands. Others tried guilt, pretending to be concerned for me. I ignored every one of them. But then the tone shifted. I began receiving texts from other relatives. At first, it was a couple of cousins, just checking in, asking if I was okay. Then an aunt, then an uncle, and finally my grandmother. Emily, sweetheart, she wrote, your mom says you abandoned them and left the house half finished. What's really going on? I closed my eyes. They were trying to poison the well. It wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about pride. They didn't want to admit to anyone that the home they'd taken from me was falling apart. They needed a scapegoat. My anger rose like a tide, but I stayed calm. This was exactly what they wanted. A reaction, a return, someone to come fix their mess. But that wasn't going to happen. Because now, finally, the truth was beginning to break through. And for once, I wasn't the one left holding the blame. I didn't respond to my grandmother right away. I knew exactly what was unfolding. My parents were rushing to rewrite the story before I could speak. They weren't just reaching out to me anymore. They were reaching everyone else, making sure their version got there first. I could picture their narrative perfectly. Emily walked out after everything we did for her. We let her stay in the house rent-free. She threw a tantrum over nothing and left the place a wreck. We gave her everything, and she paid us back with silence. None of it mentioned that I had funded the entire build, or that I'd poured my time, energy, and savings into making that guest house livable. None of that fit their story, because in their version, I was always the selfish one, the ungrateful child. And the worst part, I knew some people would believe them. That's how it had always been. They'd twist the truth until it suited them perfectly. But I wasn't going to play their game anymore. So I let the calls ring out. I let the texts pile up. I didn't engage, didn't explain. I watched the screen fill with missed notifications. Then, after a few days, the tone of the messages changed. The relatives who once sounded concerned now sounded different, less certain, more questioning. Something was shifting. And I had a pretty good idea why. It wasn't just that my parents were losing their grip on me. They were starting to lose their grip on the house too, the one they took from me. It began with a text from my aunt. Emily, honey, I heard the guest house is unlivable. Someone said mold is spreading in there. Is that true? I stared at her message, heart slowing. That wasn't something my parents had mentioned in their angry voicemails. They talked about plumbing issues, electrical problems, but mold? And if mold was spreading, that meant it wasn't minor. It was serious. Another message buzzed in, this time from my cousin. Hey, random question. Is it true your parents don't have the money to fix the guest house? I heard Lisa's fiance is pissed because they expected to move in by now. I swallowed hard. I had a feeling my parents were in trouble. They had assumed I would come back to fix everything. That I would feel guilty or desperate enough to be accepted again, that I just do what they wanted, but I didn't. No, now they were stuck with a completely unlivable house that was falling apart faster than they could cover it up. And the best part, they had promised it to Lisa and her fiancé, which meant that for the first time, my sister was turning against them too. I knew it was only a matter of time before Lisa called, and when she did, she didn't even try to hide her frustration. "Emily, what the hell is wrong with that house?" she snapped the moment I picked up. I almost laughed. "Why are you asking me?" I said calmly. "Because she huffed. Dad said you handled everything, that you worked with the contractors, that you made sure everything was done right." I did. I cut in right up until Dad decided to cut corners and hire his own guy to finish things off. "Maybe you should ask him." Silence. Then, more hesitantly, he said, "It's your fault the permits aren't going through." I raised an eyebrow. "What permits?" Lisa let out a frustrated breath. "The ones for the plumbing and electricity. They said you didn't file the final paperwork, and now the city won't approve occupancy." I blinked. Then I actually laughed, because that was when I realized my parents had played themselves. They had always assumed I would be living there, that I would be the one dealing with city inspections, handling the last few approvals. But the second they kicked me out, they had also kicked out the only person who knew how to finish the job legally, and now the city wasn't letting them move anyone in. "That's not my problem, Lisa," I said, voice calm. She let out a sharp laugh, but there was no humor in it. "You think you're so smug, don't you?" "No," I said honestly. "I just think you and Dad should have thought things through before stealing my house." "Oh my God. Emily, stop being so dramatic," she snapped. "You didn't even pay for a single thing, Lisa. Not rent, not repairs, nothing." I paid for the entire house. Silence. A long, painful silence. I could almost hear the gears turning in her head, the realization sinking in. She knew I was right. She knew that if the roles were reversed, if she had built something with her own money only to have it taken away, she would have lost her mind. But she couldn't admit that. So instead, she did what she always did. She lashed out. "Well, Mom and Dad are telling everyone that you abandoned them," she said coldly. "That you left a mess behind. You should probably know that people are talking." I didn't react. She was trying to scare me, trying to guilt me into coming back and cleaning up their mess. "Then let them talk," I said simply. Lisa let out a breath, frustrated. "God, you're so selfish. Goodbye." Lisa and I hung up. I sat there staring at my phone, feeling something strange, because I knew what was coming next. The more my parents lied, the more people would start asking questions, and they wouldn't like the answers they had. Spent years painting me as the responsible one, the one who handled things, helped out, kept the family running. Now they were suddenly trying to make me the villain, and people were going to notice the inconsistencies. I wasn't going to fight them. I wasn't going to explain myself. I didn't need to, because the truth always comes out, and for once, I wasn't the one who had anything to lose. I didn't hear from Lisa after that call. Not for a few days at least, but I knew that didn't mean things had settled down, if anything. It meant things were getting worse. My parents and sister weren't the type to accept consequences quietly. If Lisa had gone silent, it was only because she was scrambling behind the scenes trying to find a way to fix things without admitting they messed up. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of reaching out first. And then, just as I expected, the call started again, first from a random uncle I barely spoke to, then from an older cousin who lived out of state, then finally from my grandmother. That's when I knew things had escalated, because my grandmother was the last person my parents would have wanted involved. She wasn't the type to blindly take their side. She was sharp, no nonsense, and didn't fall for guilt trips. She was calling me. It meant she had heard the whole story, or at least their version of it. I picked up Emily, sweetheart, she said, her voice warm but firm. "I just had a very interesting conversation with your mother," I smiled to myself. "Let me guess. I said she told you I abandoned them and left a disaster behind." "Something like that," my grandmother said. I could hear the skepticism in her tone, but I've known you a long time, and that didn't sound quite right to me. I exhaled slowly. "What did she say? That you stormed off over a silly misunderstanding? Left the guest house unfinished? And now your poor sister and her fiancé have nowhere to live, and of course, she and your father are heartbroken that you've turned your back on the family." I let out a short laugh. "Did she mention that I paid for the entire house?" There was a pause. Then, dryly, "No, I don't believe she did. Of course she didn't." "So what really happened?" my grandmother asked. And for the first time, I told someone the full truth. I told her how my parents had encouraged me to build the guest house, promising it would be mine, how I had used my own savings and spent months managing the construction, picking out materials, making sure everything was perfect. And then the moment it was finished, they gave it away to Lisa. My grandmother didn't interrupt me. Once she just listened, and when I was done, she let out a slow, measured breath. "That's low," she finally said. "Yeah," I muttered. "And let me guess," she continued. "They expected you to come crawling back the moment things started falling apart." Bingo. There was a pause. Then she said something. "I wasn't expecting you should come to Sunday dinner." I blinked. "What everyone's going to be?" "There," she said, a hint of amusement in her voice. "I think it's time you let everyone hear your side," Grandma said. I paused. It wasn't that I feared my parents. I was long past needing their approval. But confronting them in front of the whole family, that was a whole different story. "Grandma, I'm not sure I want to," I admitted. "I'm not telling you to make a scene," she cut in. "I'm just saying, let them dig their own grave." I thought about that, and slowly a small smile crept across my face. "All right," I said, "I'll come." Sunday dinner. I showed up 10 minutes late, intentionally. The second I stepped through the door, I felt the change in atmosphere. People had clearly heard rumors. Some gave me curious glances. Others shifted uncomfortably. Then there were the few, my aunt, a couple of cousins, who gave subtle nods, like they were already in on the truth. Lisa sat stiffly beside our parents, arms tightly crossed. She didn't look at me. My mom forced a cheerful tone. "Oh, Emily, you actually came." "Yeah," I replied, settling into an empty chair. I didn't add, "Surprising, isn't it?" But it was implied. Dinner began with stiff conversation, the kind where tension crackled beneath every word. It was so thick you could slice it with a knife. And then, right as we were wrapping up the meal, my grandmother, bless her, put down her glass and turned to Lisa. "So, Lisa," she said, "how's the new house coming along?" The room went silent. Lisa's jaw clenched. "We're still dealing with a few problems," she muttered. My dad jumped in quickly. "Oh, nothing serious," he said with a chuckle. Grandma raised her brows. "What sort of problems?" Lisa gave him a sharp look, but my dad cleared his throat and replied, "Just some plumbing issues, a few electrical glitches. Really, nothing big. Minor delays." I nearly laughed out loud. Minor delays. That's what they were calling it. Then Grandma turned to me. "Emily, dear," she said, "weren't you the one overseeing that construction?" All eyes shifted toward me. I took a slow sip from my glass before setting it down. "I was," I said calmly, "up until Dad decided to bring in a cheaper contractor behind my back to cut costs." I paused, then added with a shrug, "I warned him it was a mistake, but hey, what do I know?" The silence that followed was deafening. Lisa's cheeks flushed bright red. My mom's fake smile faltered. Dad looked like he wanted to explode. But they didn't say a word, because they couldn't. They knew I was telling the truth. And now, so did everyone else. The whispers started quickly. My aunt leaned in, murmuring something to my cousin. My uncle shook his head and muttered, "Unbelievable." And just like that, they lost control of the narrative. No matter how many stories they spun, no matter how they tried to reshape the past, the damage was done. The truth had landed. I left that dinner feeling lighter than I had in months. There had been no shouting, no confrontation. I had simply spoken the truth, and that was enough. My parents didn't call me after that. Neither did Lisa. The silence was telling. The fallout had settled. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was the one who lost.